The year is 30 before our era. Egypt stands as the last independent kingdom of the eastern Mediterranean, while Rome dominates every shore around it. And on this night, in the royal capital of Alexandria, the 300-year rule of the Ptolemies is approaching its final moment. There's a striking historical paradox. Cleopatra governs one of the wealthiest states of the ancient world, yet holds less real power than at any point in her reign. Her armies are broken, her allies gone, and Rome, under Octavian, advances with disciplined precision. Yet one question continues to trouble historians. Why, with the possibility of survival as a captive in Rome, does Cleopatra choose death and choose it in a way that remains uncertain to this day? Was this the last gesture of a defeated ruler, or a deliberate political act meant to protect her children and her dynasty's memory? Inside an Alexandrian mausoleum, a single torch burns, its light wavering across stone walls built in the age of her ancestors. Here, unseen by the world, Cleopatra prepares for the decision that will end her life and reshape the political map of the Mediterranean. Within hours, an event will occur that will extinguish the final independent monarchy of the ancient East and open the way for Rome's transformation into an empire. To understand the fall, we must first understand the woman at its center. Everything that follows begins here. In the final months of 30 before our era, Egypt remains the only major kingdom of the Eastern Mediterranean not yet absorbed into the orbit of Rome for 3 centuries. The Ptolemaic dynasty has ruled the Nile Valley from Alexandria, blending Greek military heritage with Egypt's long administrative tradition. But now the structural stability that once sustained the kingdom is rapidly failing. Egypt is still independent in title, yet increasingly vulnerable in reality. Alexandria, the capital, shows the symptoms of decline in its daily life. The city wakes more quietly than before. Markets open with fewer goods, and conversations focus not on commerce, but on the movements of Octavian's forces. The port, normally one of the busiest in the ancient world, has lost its rhythm. After the defeat of Mark Antony at the Battle of Actium, Egypt's fleet is gone, leaving the coastline exposed and trade routes disrupted. This single military event transforms Egypt from a regional power into a state struggling to maintain basic strategic control. The city's population is diverse: Greeks, native Egyptians, Jews, Syrians, and resident Romans live alongside each other. During prosperous times, this diversity drives cultural and economic vitality. During crisis, it becomes a source of uncertainty. Ancient sources describe rising tension between communities, each attempting to predict how Rome will govern the city. Some groups expect improved order under Roman rule. Others fear the loss of privileges. Members of the administrative elite begin to weigh potential advantages of aligning with Octavian before his arrival. Their calculations reflect a deeper truth. Egypt's wealth endures, but its political cohesion is weakening. Cleopatra receives regular intelligence reports from scouts and diplomatic contacts. She knows Octavian is advancing deliberately, avoiding unnecessary battles. His strategy is clear. Alexandria must be captured intact. A functioning capital will benefit Rome more than a ruined city. His slow, controlled approach creates a sense of inevitability inside Egypt. Each new report about Roman camps, about troop movements, reinforces the perception that resistance cannot succeed. The daily environment of Alexandria changes accordingly. Imported goods become scarce. Certain oils and metals are harder to acquire. Even the Pharos lighthouse, one of the architectural wonders of the ancient world, begins operating irregularly due to disrupted fuel supplies. For a city built on maritime commerce and visibility, the dimming of its lighthouse carries symbolic weight. It signals that Alexandria is losing control over the sea that once defined its power. Ordinary residents respond to the uncertainty through caution rather than open protest. Families avoid large public spaces. Temples receive increased offerings. Artisans reduce production, unsure of future demand. The administrative structure continues to function, but with limited confidence. As officials quietly prepare for a shift in authority, a central historical question arises at this point. Why does Cleopatra not attempt a retreat into Upper Egypt, where natural defenses and traditional loyalties might offer temporary protection? Scholars offer several interpretations. One suggests practical limitations. Without a fleet and with weak internal support, large-scale movement southward is not feasible. Another emphasizes legitimacy, abandoning Alexandria, the political and economic heart of the kingdom, could undermine her remaining authority. A third view highlights psychological and strategic realism. Cleopatra may already recognize that military resistance would only prolong suffering without changing the outcome. Inside the royal court, discussions reflect this growing clarity. Some ancient accounts reference considerations of moving the treasury into underground chambers beneath the city. Such structures existed, but no archaeological evidence indicates significant transfers. This absence supports the interpretation that Cleopatra does not anticipate a lengthy siege. She expects negotiations or surrender to determine the end. Meanwhile, Octavian's agents operate discreetly inside Alexandria. Their presence is confirmed in Roman sources. They gather intelligence, influence officials, and encourage defections. Their objective is to prepare the city psychologically for a transition of power with minimal disruption. Combined with the visible approach of Roman troops, this undermines any remaining will to resist. By the time Roman camps become visible on the horizon, Alexandria is living in two overlapping realities. The first is fear, the awareness that the kingdom's independence is slipping away. The second is fragile hope, belief that the city's cultural and economic value will persuade Octavian to spare it. Yet each passing day narrows the space for optimism. As tension settles over Alexandria, a larger historical insight emerges. Egypt as fate is no longer determined by armies, but by a single individual, Cleopatra, whose decisions will shape the final chapter of the 300-year Ptolemaic dynasty. Cleopatra VII grows up in Alexandria, the capital of the Ptolemaic Kingdom, during a period of political fragility. She is born into a dynasty that has ruled Egypt since the early 3rd century before our era, a dynasty established after the division of Alexander the Great's empire. Her childhood unfolds within a court where succession disputes, internal conflicts, and shifting alliances with Rome are part of daily political life. Cleopatra receives an unusually broad education for a ruler of her period. Ancient writers record her mastery of several languages, including Egyptian. This places her in contrast to earlier Ptolemies, who typically rely on translators in dealings with native populations. Her linguistic skills allow her to communicate with diplomats from surrounding regions, with local priests, and with administrative officials throughout the Nile Valley. Her education includes training in mathematics, philosophy, astronomy, and rhetoric. Alexandria, with its libraries and scholarly institutions, offers access to a wide range of intellectual activity. The environment exposes her to scientific and administrative knowledge that supports the functioning of a Hellenistic kingdom. These subjects are not theoretical additions to her upbringing. They prepare her to engage directly with matters of governance. Cleopatra's early years are shaped by the political challenges of her father, Ptolemy XII. During his reign, he is expelled from Egypt and later restored to power with assistance from Rome. Cleopatra witnesses firsthand the dependence of her dynasty on Roman intervention. When he returns to the throne with Roman military support, the connection between Egypt's political stability and Rome's internal dynamics becomes fully visible. She grows into adulthood understanding that relations with Roman leaders will play a decisive role in the survival of the Ptolemaic state. Documents from her father's reign include her name alongside official decrees, showing that she participates in administrative decisions before formally assuming full authority. These records indicate that she is involved in governance, accompanies her father in public functions, and gains familiarity with the machinery of the state at a relatively early age. When Cleopatra comes to power, she faces a kingdom already strained by economic pressures and internal fragmentation. Grain distribution, tax collection, and relations between different ethnic groups in Alexandria become pressing concerns. In the first years of her reign, She acts to stabilize the administration, manage shortages, and reassert royal authority over regions that show signs of weakening loyalty. Cleopatra establishes her position within Egypt through close association with native religious institutions. Temple inscriptions depict her in traditional pharaonic imagery, and she participates in ceremonies that affirm her role as a legitimate Egyptian monarch. This integration into religious life strengthens her connection to rural regions, where traditional structures hold significant influence. It also reflects the long-standing practice of Ptolemaic rulers adopting dual Greek and Egyptian identities in state representation. Her political trajectory changes dramatically when Julius Caesar arrives in Alexandria during the Roman Civil War. Cleopatra forms a political partnership with Caesar after he intervenes in the Ptolemaic succession dispute. His support restores her authority and secures her position against internal rivals. Their partnership produces a son, Caesarion, whose birth gives Cleopatra a dynastic link to the most influential figure in Rome. Under their arrangement, Egypt experiences a period of relative stability, and Cleopatra strengthens her administrative control over the kingdom. After Caesar's assassination, the political landscape of Rome reorganizes around competing factions. Cleopatra aligns with Mark Antony, who assumes control of the eastern territories of Rome's divided leadership. Egypt becomes an essential partner in his military and financial planning. Cleopatra supplies grain, fleet support, and monetary resources for his campaigns. Their relationship produces 3 children and integrates Egyptian interests into Antony's broader political structure. This alignment also places Egypt at the center of Rome's internal conflict. Octavian, Antony's rival, presents the partnership between Cleopatra and Antony as a threat to Roman unity. Public declarations in Rome describe her influence as harmful to the stability of the state. These declarations shape Roman public opinion and become part of the political justification for confrontation. The combined political and military responsibilities of Cleopatra increase significantly during this period. She oversees resource allocation, naval preparation, and regional diplomacy while managing the internal needs of Egypt. Her alliance with Antony ties the kingdom's survival directly to the outcome of the Roman struggle for supremacy. The defeat of Antony at the Battle of Actium in the year 31 before our era begins the final phase of Cleopatra's political life. With the fleet destroyed and Antony's position collapsing, Egypt loses the capacity to defend its borders. In the months that follow, Cleopatra focuses on administrative stability and prepares for the expected arrival of Octavian's forces. Grain management, treasury control, and the maintenance of order in Alexandria become central priorities. By the time Octavian begins his final approach to the city, Cleopatra's political formation, her education, multilingual ability, administrative experience, and long engagement with both Egyptian institutions and Roman leaders has shaped her into one of the most capable rulers of her era. But these strengths exist within a geopolitical structure that now overwhelmingly favors Rome. The kingdom she governs is no longer positioned to act independently. Its future depends not on internal policy, but on the outcome of Rome's competing ambitions. By the 1st century before our era, the Ptolemaic Kingdom shows clear signs of structural weakening. The dynasty that began with Ptolemy I, a general of Alexander the Great, once controlled territories stretching across the eastern Mediterranean. Over time, however, these lands are reduced as the kingdom loses military strength and financial stability. By the reign of Cleopatra VII, Egypt's borders consist primarily of the Nile Valley, the Fayum, and parts of the eastern desert. The administrative system established in earlier centuries remains highly developed. It includes organized tax collection, extensive agricultural management, and a bureaucracy capable of maintaining detailed records. Yet this system depends on economic output and political unity. Both declined during the late Ptolemaic period. Population pressure, regional unrest, and repeated succession conflicts strained the administrative apparatus. Large areas of rural Egypt experienced periods of reduced central control, requiring repeated interventions from the court. Financial pressures also grow. Ptolemaic rulers accumulate significant debts to Roman lenders, especially during military campaigns. Ptolemy XII, Cleopatra's father, pays substantial sums to Roman officials to regain and maintain his throne. These expenditures place long-term burdens on the state treasury. By Cleopatra's reign, Egypt remains wealthy in agricultural production, but its liquid financial reserves are limited by these earlier commitments. The military structure of the kingdom shows similar decline. Earlier Ptolemies maintained strong armies composed of Greek settlers, mercenaries, and native Egyptian units. Over time, the kingdom becomes increasingly dependent on foreign soldiers. By the late 1st century before our era, a significant portion of its military strength relies on hired troops whose loyalty is tied to consistent payment. When financial resources weaken, maintaining these forces becomes difficult. During the conflicts of Cleopatra's reign, defections and reduced morale become recurring challenges. Externally, Egypt faces growing pressure from Rome. After the Roman conquest of Syria, Cyrene, and large parts of Asia Minor, Egypt becomes the last major Hellenistic monarchy not under Roman authority. Its political autonomy depends on maintaining favorable relations with dominant Roman figures. Each shift in Roman leadership affects the security of the Ptolemaic state. When Julius Caesar supports Cleopatra and restores her rule, Egypt experiences temporary stability. After his assassination, the kingdom finds itself positioned between competing Roman factions whose internal struggles directly influence its future. The economic importance of Egypt further intensifies Roman interest. The Nile Valley produces significant quantities of grain, which are essential for urban centers across the Mediterranean. Control of this supply becomes strategically valuable. As a result, Egypt's agricultural output, once a foundation of its independence, now attracts the attention of Roman leaders seeking secure access to food resources. Political divisions inside Egypt also contribute to the weakening of the state. Rivalries within the royal family create instability. Cleopatra initially co-rules with her younger brother Ptolemy XIII, then with Ptolemy XIV, and later elevates her son Caesarion as co-ruler. These transitions follow a pattern common to the dynasty: shared rule combined with internal power struggles. Such conflicts disrupt continuity, complicate governance, and create opportunities for external intervention. In Alexandria, the relationship between the Greek elite, native Egyptian population, and other communities becomes increasingly complex. Each group maintains its own institutions, leaders, and traditions. The monarchy must balance these interests to preserve order. Periodic unrest occurs in the city and in parts of the countryside. The need to manage diverse groups demands administrative focus that becomes more difficult to maintain during periods of external threat. The defeat at the Battle of Actium accelerates the state's decline. After the loss of Antony's fleet, Egypt no longer controls the eastern Mediterranean. Roman forces dominate sea routes, limiting the kingdom's ability to import vital goods or maintain diplomatic connections. The loss of naval power also restricts communication with allied territories. With maritime access reduced, Alexandria becomes increasingly isolated. In the months following Actium, the kingdom lacks both the military capacity and political leverage to counter Roman movement. Octavian's forces advanced through the eastern Mediterranean with little resistance. Cities that once maintained ties with Egypt shift their allegiance to Rome. Trade networks that supported Egyptian wealth adjust to new political realities. The kingdom's regional influence diminishes. Inside Egypt, administrative records show an emphasis on maintaining internal stability. Officials work to regulate grain distribution, manage taxation, and preserve order in Alexandria. These efforts demonstrate that the state continues to function, but under conditions of increasing constraint. The absence of significant military reinforcement indicates that available resources are not sufficient for prolonged resistance. By the time Octavian approaches the borders of Egypt, the structural weaknesses of the Ptolemaic state are fully exposed. The kingdom retains its agricultural productivity, its urban centers, and its administrative capacity. But it lacks the combined military, financial, and diplomatic strength required to preserve independence against the expanding power of Rome. At this stage, the internal condition of the state leaves Cleopatra with limited options. The political environment no longer favors negotiation from a position of strength. Egypt enters its final phase as a sovereign kingdom under conditions shaped not by its own institutions, but by the strategic ambitions of Rome. During the final decades of the first century before our era, Rome becomes the dominant force of the Mediterranean world. Its expansion follows a clear pattern: the incorporation of former Hellenistic territories, the absorption of regional kingdoms through alliances or conquest, and the consolidation of power under competing Roman leaders. By the time of Cleopatra's reign, the political map around Egypt is largely shaped by Roman authority. After the death of Julius Caesar, control of Rome divides between key figures: Mark Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus. Their formal agreement, known as the Second Triumvirate, assigned Antony the Eastern Mediterranean. This division gives Antony control over territories that border Egypt, including Syria and parts of Asia Minor. These regions serve as strategic bases for Roman administration, military operations, and taxation. With Rome asserting control across the eastern provinces, Egypt stands as the last major monarchy outside Roman rule. Antony's presence in the east establishes regular contact between Rome and Egypt. He uses cities such as Tarsus, Antioch, and Ephesus as headquarters for campaigns and diplomatic meetings. From these positions, he evaluates the political value of Egypt's resources. Grain, metals, papyrus, textiles, and financial reserves in Alexandria play a direct role in supporting his operations. The alliance between Antony and Cleopatra connects Egyptian resources with Roman military planning on a scale not seen in earlier periods. Octavian, based in Rome and Italy, focuses on gaining support among the Roman population and the Senate. He strengthens his position through legal measures, public distributions, and control of Italian military forces. While Antony commands the east, Octavian gradually builds political legitimacy in Rome, presenting himself as a stabilizing figure after years of civil war. The relationship between Antony and Octavian deteriorates as their political aims diverge. Antony's associations with Cleopatra become central to this conflict. Public documents released in Rome present Antony as influenced by Egypt's queen, emphasizing his residence in Alexandria, his recognition of Caesarion, and the distribution of territories to Cleopatra's children. These announcements are presented in Rome as signs of Antony's departure from Roman tradition. The formal break occurs when Octavian obtains Antony's will, stored in the Temple of Vesta. The document includes provisions concerning burial in Alexandria and formal recognition of Cleopatra's children. Its disclosure in Rome affects public opinion. The will becomes a political tool used to argue that Antony intends to shift power away from Rome toward Alexandria. This shift strengthens Octavian's position. He gains authorization from the Senate to prepare for war. The conflict is presented not as a Roman civil war, but as a campaign against an external monarch, Cleopatra. This framing gives Octavian additional authority to mobilize forces and present his actions as necessary for the security of the Roman state and its traditions. Antony prepares for the expected confrontation by assembling a large fleet in the eastern Mediterranean. Cleopatra contributes ships, sailors, and financial support. Their combined fleet gathers near Actium on the western coast of Greece. The battle that follows in the year 31 before our era becomes a decisive moment in Mediterranean politics. Octavian's admiral Marcus Agrippa employs superior naval tactics, blockading Antony's movements and cutting his supply routes. The defeat breaks Antony's military capability and forces his retreat to Egypt. Following the victory at Actium, Octavian expands his control rapidly. His forces occupy Greece and move through Asia Minor. Cities formerly aligned with Antony shift allegiance to Octavian. Trade routes adjust to new political realities. Roman troops secure key coastal points that previously linked Egypt with its allies. With Antony's fleet destroyed, the sea becomes dominated by Octavian's command. In Egypt, Antony and Cleopatra regroup in Alexandria. They reinforce defensive positions, reorganize administrative functions, and prepare for further conflict. However, the loss of naval power and declining regional support limit their options. Without the ability to control the sea or secure reinforcements, Egypt becomes increasingly isolated. Octavian advances toward Egypt with calculated precision. His approach prioritizes speed, discipline, and the avoidance of unnecessary conflict. He aims to incorporate Egypt into Roman rule with minimal disruption to its economic structures. This approach reflects Rome's interest in Egypt's grain production, which is essential for the stability of Rome's urban population. As Octavian's forces move along the eastern Mediterranean and through the Levant, cities open their gates without resistance. Roman naval units secure the approaches to Alexandria, reducing the possibility of escape or external assistance. By the time Octavian arrives at the Egyptian border, the strategic position favors Rome completely. Antony's remaining forces are significantly outnumbered, and Egypt lacks the military reserves needed for prolonged defense. The political ambitions of both Antony and Octavian determine the final trajectory of Egypt. Antony's reliance on eastern territories and his partnership with Cleopatra connect Egypt's fate to the outcome of Roman internal struggles. Octavian's intention to consolidate authority and secure control of grain supplies makes Egypt a central objective. These combined developments bring the 300-year-old Ptolemaic Kingdom into direct confrontation with Rome's expanding power. As Octavian prepares for the final approach to Alexandria, the regional structure of the eastern Mediterranean has shifted decisively. Rome controls nearly all surrounding territories, trade routes, and military positions. Egypt stands alone, facing an opponent whose political and military resources exceed those of any previous Mediterranean power. The partnership between Cleopatra VII and Mark Antony developed within the political framework created after the division of Roman authority. Among the leaders of the Second Triumvirate, Antony controls the eastern territories of the Mediterranean, and his responsibilities require substantial military, administrative, and financial resources. Egypt, under Cleo, holds the agricultural wealth, fleet capacity, and monetary reserves capable of supporting large-scale Roman operations. Their alliance forms at the intersection of these needs. Antony summons Cleopatra to Tarsus in the year 41 before our era. The meeting results in an agreement that links Egypt to his political and military plans. Following this, Cleopatra returns to Alexandria, bringing Antony with her. He remains in the city for an extended period, using it as a base for governance and preparation. During this time, he confirms Cleopatra's authority and secures her position within Egypt. His presence in Alexandria strengthens the monarchy as internal stability and provides protection against potential challenges from within the royal family or from external rivals. Cleopatra provides Antony with significant financial support. Ancient records describe contributions of grain, manpower, and monetary resources for his campaigns. Egypt's agricultural surplus is especially important as it assists in feeding soldiers and supporting fleets across the eastern Mediterranean. In return, Antony grants territories to Cleopatra, including parts of Cyprus, Cilicia, and regions along the Levanten coast. These transfers extend Egypt's influence and reinforce the partnership. The alliance produces 3 children: Alexander Helios, Cleopatra Selene, and Ptolemy Philadelphus. Antony formally recognizes them and assigns them symbolic territories during the Donations of Alexandria ceremony in the year 34 before our era. The event includes public announcements in which territories of the eastern Mediterranean are designated to Cleopatra and her children. These announcements record Antony's distribution of lands, such as Armenia, Media, Parthia, not yet conquered, and parts of Syria. The ceremony establishes a public framework that links Antony's rule in the east to Cleopatra as dynastic claims. The donations strengthen Cleopatra's position, but they also define the political alignment between Egypt and Antony. Roman sources describe the ceremony in detail. and these accounts later become central to Roman political arguments against Antony. The presence of Cleopatra on a throne beside Antony, and the recognition of Caesarion as a legitimate ruler, are elements highlighted in Roman declarations circulated after the ceremony. During this period, Antony conducts military campaigns in Armenia and plans further operations toward Parthia. Egypt provides supplies and logistical support, including ships and transport provisions. Alexandria becomes an important administrative center for coordinating these efforts. The city hosts Roman officials, military personnel, messengers, and diplomats linked to Antony's operations. The alliance affects the internal administration of Egypt as well. With Antony's backing, Cleopatra exercises full authority over domestic governance. Records show continued activity in taxation, temple building, economic regulation, and maintenance of local administrations across the Nile Valley. Egyptian temples receive royal support, and inscriptions depict Cleopatra in the role of a traditional pharaoh, reinforcing her rule in both Greek and Egyptian contexts. Relations between Antony and Octavian deteriorate during these years. Public declarations in Rome emphasize Antony's association with Cleopatra, his residence in Alexandria, and his recognition of Caesarion. The publication of Antony's will, stored in the Temple of Vesta, intensifies the conflict. The document includes instructions concerning burial arrangements and provisions for Cleopatra and her children. Its release shifts Roman political sentiment and contributes to Octavian's efforts to gain formal approval for action. The alliance between Antony and Cleopatra becomes inseparable from the wider Roman struggle for supremacy. As Rome moves toward confrontation, the partnership stands at the center of the debate. Egypt's role in supplying resources to Antony and supporting his campaigns places the kingdom directly within the structure of Roman military planning. The connection between the two rulers extends beyond personal association and operates as a political and administrative linkage between a Roman power center and the Egyptian monarchy. After the defeat at the Battle of Actium in the year 31 before our era, the alliance experiences its final phase. Antony and Cleopatra return to Alexandria, where they reorganize their remaining forces. They oversee the construction and repair of defensive works, strengthen administrative functions, and prepare for the arrival of Octavian. Egypt's remaining ships and troops assemble near the city, but the loss of naval power at Actium severely restricts strategic options. In the months after their return, both rulers continued to coordinate governmental and military activities. Alexandria functions as the central base for their administration. Grain distribution, financial management, and urban security remain active responsibilities. However, with Octavian's forces gaining control of the eastern Mediterranean, the alliance's capacity to operate beyond Egypt's borders becomes increasingly limited. By the time Octavian begins his advance toward Egypt, the partnership between Cleopatra and Antony has determined the kingdom's political trajectory. Their combined decisions link the fate of Egypt to the outcome of Rome's internal disputes. The resources of the Nile Valley, once used to support regional ambitions, now stand exposed to the expanding power of Rome. The Battle of Actium, fought in the year 31 before our era, marks a decisive break in the balance of power between Mark Antony and Octavian. The engagement takes place off the western coast of Greece, near the promontory of Actium, where Antony and Cleopatra assemble a large fleet. Octavian's forces, commanded by Marcus Agrippa, control key positions along the coast and maintain stronger supply lines. The geography of the area favors the fleet capable of maneuvering more effectively in narrow waters, and Agrippa uses this advantage to restrict Antony's movements. Antony's ships include several large vessels designed for direct confrontation. Cleopatra contributes a squadron position on the left wing of the fleet. During the battle, Agrippa's forces block Antony's attempts to break through the formation. Cleopatra's squadron withdraws from the engagement and heads toward the open sea. Antony follows, and the remaining fleet collapses without unified direction. The loss of ships and personnel weakens the military capacity of both Antony and Cleopatra significantly. After Actium, Octavian secures control of Greece and the western coastline of the eastern Mediterranean. Cities that previously supported Antony shift their allegiance. Supplies and reinforcements to Egypt become increasingly difficult to obtain. With the sea dominated by Octavian's fleet, Egypt's communication with potential allies is effectively cut off. The political landscape of the region changes rapidly as Roman forces occupy strategic locations. Reorganize administrative structures. Antony and Cleopatra withdraw to Alexandria. Their return marks the beginning of Egypt's final year as an independent kingdom. In the city, both rulers focus on restoring defensive capabilities. They reinforce coastal positions, reorganize remaining troops, and prepare for a land and sea assault. Alexandria's port becomes a hub for repairing damaged ships and coordinating naval activity, although the available fleet is limited compared to its former size. Inside Egypt, administrative documents indicate continued governmental activity. The collection of taxes, grain management, and the functioning of temple institutions continue. These records show that the kingdom maintains internal order despite external pressure. Cleopatra oversees financial administration and ensures that the city's grain reserves are protected, as grain remains a central economic resource. Antony coordinates military matters and maintains Roman personnel stationed in Egypt. The broader economic situation becomes increasingly constrained. Trade with eastern Mediterranean ports declines because many of these cities are now aligned with Octavian. The flow of goods into Alexandria slows. Certain imported materials become scarce, and the reduction of maritime commerce affects sectors dependent on overseas trade. Octavian prepares for a final campaign. His forces move through Syria and Judea and assemble near the Egyptian frontier. His strategy includes both land and naval components. Roman troops advance along the coast, while naval units secure the approaches to Alexandria. Octavian's intention is to prevent escape, restrict reinforcements, and force a swift conclusion. As Roman forces draw closer, internal stability in Egypt remains under pressure. While the administrative system continues to function, military morale declines. Some foreign soldiers previously loyal to Antony leave the service. The loss of naval power and the absence of regional allies contribute to the sense of inevitable defeat. Within Alexandria, preparations for confrontation proceed. Defensive walls, coastal fortifications, and key access points receive additional attention. Workshops in the city produce military equipment and repair damaged infrastructure. However, the scale of preparation does not match the magnitude of the Roman threat. The kingdom's resources, once extensive, cannot compensate for the combined political and military strength of Octavian's forces. The final movements begin in the summer of 30 before our era. Octavian's troops enter Egyptian territory and proceed toward Pelusium, a fortified city near the eastern border. Pelusium surrenders without major resistance. The lack of confrontation at this key defensive position leaves Alexandria exposed. Octavian advances along the Nile, securing additional towns and strategic points. The Roman naval forces blockade Alexandria's harbor. With land and sea routes closed, the city becomes isolated. The remaining Egyptian fleet is unable to challenge the Roman position. Antony attempts one final naval operation, but the majority of his ships surrender or defect. His remaining cavalry also leaves the field. These developments effectively end any possibility of organized resistance. In Alexandria, the situation becomes critical. Antony and Cleopatra still maintain administrative control of the city, but military options are exhausted. Roman forces prepare for the final entry. Antony attempts to regroup with infantry forces near the city walls, but the remaining troops cannot withstand coordinated Roman assault. Octavian's forces enter Alexandria shortly afterward. The city does not experience large-scale destruction. Roman troops secure key locations, including the palace district, the port, and major administrative buildings. The transition occurs with limited violence. consistent with Octavian's objective of preserving the economic and cultural value of Alexandria. By the end of this phase, Egypt is no longer capable of exercising independent action. The defeat at Actium has consequences that extend beyond the battlefield. It removes the kingdom's naval strength, isolates it from external support, and places its future entirely within the control of Rome. When Octavian's forces enter Egyptian territory in the summer of 30 before our era, Alexandria becomes the central objective of the campaign. The city is the capital of the Ptolemaic Kingdom, the location of the royal palace, and the administrative center from which Cleopatra governs. Its strategic position on the Mediterranean coast and its role in regional trade routes make it essential for controlling Egypt. Pelusium, the fortified city guarding Egypt's eastern entrance, surrenders early in the campaign. Ancient reports describe the event without detailed explanation, but the outcome eliminates the kingdom's first line of defense. Once Pelusium falls, Octavian's forces move along the Nile, encountering limited resistance. Towns on the river surrender, and Roman troops advance toward Alexandria with coordinated land and naval components. Alexandria prepares for siege. The city possesses strong walls, coastal fortifications, and a harbor capable of supporting large fleets. Workshops repair ships and produce equipment. Armories distribute weapons to remaining soldiers and to auxiliary forces stationed in the city. Gates and defensive towers receive additional reinforcement. The Pharos Lighthouse continues to operate, guiding naval activity within the harbor, although it now serves internal organization rather than control of maritime routes. Inside the city, daily life changes sharply. Some residents leave districts near the walls. Markets operate under reduced conditions. Grain distribution becomes more controlled, and urban officials monitor reserves closely. Alexandria's population includes Greeks, Egyptians, Jews, and Roman residents. Each community responds differently to the advancing forces, but all recognize that the city faces isolation. With land and sea routes closing, residents rely on stored supplies. Antony remains in Alexandria and directs remaining military activities. He organizes infantry around key defensive points and deploys cavalry units to monitor Roman movements. Cleopatra oversees palace administration and ensures the continuation of essential governmental functions. Records show ongoing financial directives, temple maintenance, and management of urban institutions. The administrative system remains active even as the military situation deteriorates. Roman forces arrive near Alexandria and begin coordinated operations. The naval component blocks the harbor entrances, preventing escape or reinforcement by sea. The land forces establish positions around the city, controlling major approaches and isolating Alexandria from the Nile hinterland. With the blockade in place, communication with surrounding regions becomes extremely limited. Antony attempts a final naval engagement using the ships remaining in Alexandria. Ancient accounts describe the fleet advancing from the harbor to confront Roman forces. Before battle begins, many of Antony's ships surrender or move toward Roman lines. The lack of coordinated support ends the operation. Antony withdraws to the city, and naval resistance ceases. The surrender of the fleet affects morale throughout Alexandria. Naval capabilities have been central to the city's identity since its founding. The loss signals that Egypt's final defensive resource is gone. Remaining infantry and auxiliary troops continue to hold defensive positions. But without naval support and with limited cavalry, the city's strategic options diminish. Land engagements follow. Antony leads a group of infantry outside the walls near the hippodrome area. Roman forces engage and defeat these troops. Antony retreats into the city. The defeat leaves the defensive perimeter weakened and reduces the number of soldiers capable of resisting coordinated Roman assault. Roman troops expand their positions and secure control of approaches to the palace district. Inside Alexandria, administrative records and ancient descriptions indicate that civil functions still operate. Temples continue rituals, officials maintain civic registers, and markets reopen in limited form. The continuity reflects the city's capacity for internal order, even under siege conditions. The preservation of internal administration becomes significant later when Octavian incorporates Egypt into Roman governance. Roman forces enter Alexandria shortly after the final land engagement. The entry occurs without extensive destruction. Troops secure the palace district, the port, and administrative buildings. The transition follows earlier examples of Roman occupation in other regions, focusing on establishing control rather than dismantling urban structures. Alexandria's economic and cultural value influences the restraint shown by Roman forces. Within the palace complex, the consequences of the siege unfold rapidly. Antony, facing the collapse of his remaining forces, receives erroneous information suggesting that Cleopatra has died. Ancient authors state that he attempts to take his own life. He is taken to Cleopatra, who is inside a secure mausoleum structure where she has relocated with attendants and certain possessions. Antony dies shortly afterward. Octavian takes control of the city's political center. He occupies key buildings and issues directives to secure the urban population. Cleopatra remains inside the mausoleum complex. She negotiates with Octavian's envoys and requests burial arrangements for Antony within Alexandria. Roman accounts state that she is eventually brought from the mausoleum to meet Octavian. With the siege concluded, Alexandria ceases to function as a sovereign capital. The city remains intact, but its political authority transfers to Roman command. The administrative structures of the Ptolemaic state continue briefly, now under supervision. Egypt's future becomes tied directly to decisions made by Octavian, who prepares to reorganize the region after Roman forces secure Alexandria's outer defenses. The final phase of resistance centers on Mark Antony's remaining troops inside the city. The defeat of his infantry outside the hippodrome, the surrender of his cavalry, and the collapse of his naval forces leave him with only small groups of soldiers positioned around the palace district. These units maintain defensive posts, but their ability to influence the outcome is limited. The Roman army controls the approaches to the harbor, the main gates, and the broad avenues leading toward the royal quarter. Inside Alexandria, Antony moves between defensive positions while receiving reports from commanders. Conditions within the city reflect the scale of the defeat. Armories contain unused weapons, as troops capable of wielding them are few. Barracks stand partially empty. The distribution of grain and water continues, but the movement of military supplies slows. Antony remains near the palace, directing the final arrangements for defense and communicating with officers who still hold authority in parts of the city. During this period, Cleopatra withdraws to a fortified mausoleum structure with trusted attendants. Ancient accounts describe the mausoleum as a secure complex containing chambers suitable for storage of valuables and written records. The decision to relocate there reflects her focus on preserving specific possessions and maintaining control over personal and dynastic assets. Attendants bring textiles, documents, and items of ceremonial significance into the structure. Communication between Antony and Cleopatra continues through messengers. Antony's movements are restricted by the presence of Roman units in the city, and he relies on intermediaries to deliver instructions and receive updates. Roman forces tighten their control over key intersections and administrative buildings, placing additional pressure on the palace district. A critical event occurs when Antony receives the report that Cleopatra has died inside the mausoleum. The report reaches him after the failure of a final military engagement. According to ancient narratives, he responds by attempting to take his own life. The act takes place within the palace area. His attendants discover him wounded and carry him toward Cleopatra's location. Entry into the mausoleum is limited. Accounts describe a scene in which attendants lift Antony through an upper opening. Cleopatra and her women receive him inside the structure. Antony dies soon afterward. The circumstances surrounding his death are consistently recorded in ancient texts and mark the end of his political and military role in Egypt. With Antony dead, the remaining Egyptian forces disperse or surrender. Roman troops secure the palace district and surrounding streets. Commanders issue orders to prevent looting and ensure that essential buildings remain intact. The transition from armed conflict to Roman administrative control begins immediately after the stabilization of the area. Inside the mausoleum, Cleopatra continues to communicate with Roman envoys. Messages pass between her and Octavian through intermediaries stationed near the palace. She requests burial arrangements for Antony within Alexandria. Octavian grants the request and Antony receives burial according to Egyptian and Hellenistic customs. Troops and officials oversee the ceremony's security. The death of Antony alters the political structure of the city. Roman forces no longer face organized resistance. Octavian enters Alexandria and takes formal control of the palace complex. The urban population remains under supervision, with Roman soldiers positioned at key points. Administrative buildings, including the treasury and archives, are placed under Roman authority. Octavian reorganizes the palace guard and secures the entrances to areas where Cleopatra's attendants remain located. Cleopatra remains inside the mausoleum for a short period after Antony's death. Roman envoys meet with her to present Octavian's terms. She is eventually brought from the mausoleum into the palace area under Roman escort. Ancient descriptions state that she is housed in secure quarters within the royal complex, with attendants permitted to remain with her. Medical personnel are assigned to monitor her condition, and Roman guards oversee access to her chambers. In Alexandria, the absence of further conflict allows civic functions to resume. Markets reopen, though under watch. Temple rituals continue. Grain distribution remains regulated by officials who now coordinate with Roman supervisors. The city's economy begins adjusting to the presence of Roman authority, and the urban administration operates in cooperation with newly assigned officials. Antony's collapse marks a shift in regional power. With his death, the final link between Egypt and any Roman faction opposed to Octavian is severed. The Eastern Mediterranean, once divided between competing leaders of the Roman world, moves under unified direction. Egypt is no longer positioned as a partner in a Roman alliance. It becomes a territory under direct Roman command. The events in Alexandria following Antony's death established the framework for the final phase of Cleopatra's life. She remains under guard, and the palace district becomes the setting for negotiations that determine the kingdom's future. The military resistance has ended, and political control now lies entirely with Octavian and the forces accompanying him. With Alexandria under Roman control and Antony dead, the political situation in Egypt becomes centered entirely on Cleopatra's direct interactions with Octavian. She's moved from the mausoleum to secure quarters within the palace complex, accompanied by a small group of attendants. Roman guards maintain constant oversight. Cleopatra retains limited autonomy inside her chambers, but holds no military or administrative authority beyond personal matters. Octavian establishes his headquarters in the palace district. He reorganizes the guard, secures treasury rooms, and places archives and administrative buildings under Roman supervision. His officers take inventory of the city's resources, including stored grain, armories, and financial reserves. Alexandria's administrative staff begins working under Roman oversight. Officials responsible for taxation, temple accounts, and civic management continue their duties under new authority. Cleopatra's negotiations begin shortly after her relocation. Messages are exchanged through Roman envoys. Her initial requests relate to burial arrangements for Antony, the safety of her attendants, and the management of certain personal possessions. Octavian grants the burial request. Antony is interred in Alexandria according to established customs. The granting of this request reflects Octavian's intention to maintain stability within the city and avoid unnecessary disruption. Cleopatra seeks guarantees concerning her children. Caesarion, the son of Julius Caesar, and her 3 younger children with Antony reside inside the palace complex. Ancient accounts record her efforts to secure their safety and future placement. She communicates these concerns to Octavian's envoys. Roman records state that Octavian does not immediately announce a final decision regarding the children, but he organizes their supervision and restricts their movement. Cleopatra also requests permission to retain certain symbols of rulership, including ceremonial garments and personal items associated with her status as queen. Roman officials document these items during their inspections of the palace. She is permitted to keep ceremonial clothing within her chambers but cannot use them for public appearances. Access to treasury assets, administrative tools, and royal insignia is removed. Octavian meets Cleopatra in person inside the palace. Ancient sources describe the meeting as taking place under controlled conditions, with Roman guards present. Cleopatra appears before him dressed in attire appropriate for a formal audience. Octavian addresses her position directly. According to Roman accounts, he informs her that Egypt will come under Roman authority. The monarchy will not continue, and her political role has ended. During these interactions, Octavian emphasizes the importance of Cleopatra's cooperation. He assigns Roman physicians and attendants to monitor her condition, indicating concern over her health and the potential for self-harm. Guards are instructed to prevent unauthorized access to her chambers. Food, clothing, and supplies enter her quarters under supervision. The measures reflect Rome's intention to keep her alive until their political objectives are completed. Cleopatra continues to send written messages to Octavian regarding the future of her children. While he confirms that they will not be harmed, he does not specify their eventual destination. Roman precedent indicates that children of defeated rulers are commonly taken to Rome, placed under supervision of elite families, and integrated into Roman domestic life. Caesarion's case, however, differs. His position as the son of Julius Caesar raises political concerns for Octavian, who aims to consolidate authority without competing claims. During this period, Cleopatra's attendants remain with her. Two of them, Iris and Charmian, are recorded as having close access to her chambers. They assist in daily matters, manage clothing and personal items, and maintain the queen's routines within the restricted environment. Roman guards stationed outside the chamber monitor all activity. Alexandria functions steadily under Roman control. Grain distribution resumes under combined Egyptian and Roman supervision. Temples perform rituals, and civic life continues with minimal disruption. Octavian avoids actions that might provoke unrest. He issues directives to maintain order and instructs soldiers to protect major institutions, including the mausoleum, the library district, and key temples. Information arrives concerning Caesarion's movement. Reports indicate that he has been sent south toward Upper Egypt. Octavian receives intelligence about his location and issues orders related to him. Ancient sources record that Caesarion is intercepted and killed shortly afterward. The event removes the final potential claimant linked to Julius Caesar's lineage. Cleopatra receives confirmation of these developments. Ancient accounts describe her reaction as one of withdrawal from negotiations. She reduces communication with Roman envoys and remains inside her chambers for extended periods. The Roman physicians assigned to her continue their monitoring duties, and guards maintain their positions at the entrances. Octavian prepares for his departure from Alexandria. He organizes the administrative transition of Egypt into a Roman-controlled province. He assigns officials to oversee key areas of governance, including taxation, grain shipments, and the military garrison. The reorganization signifies the end of Egypt's existence as an independent monarchy. Within the palace, Cleopatra's status becomes increasingly limited. Her political role has ended, her children are under Roman control, and the administrative structure of the kingdom no longer depends on her presence. She remains under guard while the city shifts into its new position within the Roman world. Cleopatra's circumstances in Alexandria changed significantly after the completion of Octavian's administrative arrangements. She remains confined within the palace complex under continuous Roman supervision. Guards are positioned at the entrances to her chambers, and access is strictly controlled. Roman physicians visit regularly, assigned to observe her physical condition and prevent any attempt at self-harm. These measures indicate Rome's intention to keep her alive for public display in the triumph planned in Italy. Cleopatra's attendants continue to serve her within the restricted space. Iris and Charmian, her closest personal aides, remain present throughout this period. They manage daily routines, prepare clothing, and monitor access to personal possessions. Roman guards permit them to enter and exit the queen's chambers under controlled conditions, but no other members of the former court are allowed inside. The removal of political authority becomes fully apparent as Roman officials take control of Egypt's government. Treasury rooms, military installations, and administrative records fall under Roman supervision. Cleopatra no longer has contact with regional officials, commanders, or civic leaders. Her children, kept under guard elsewhere in the palace complex, are inaccessible to her. Caesarion, intercepted during his attempted departure southward, is killed under Octavian's orders. The remaining 3 children of Cleopatra and Antony are placed under Roman oversight and prepared for relocation to Italy. Cleopatra receives confirmation of these developments. Ancient accounts report that she is informed of Caesarion's death and the removal of her remaining children from independent guardianship. The information arrives through Roman envoys or attendants who receive updates from outside the chamber. After this, her correspondence with Roman officials decreases sharply. She spends extended periods inside her quarters, attended only by her women and monitored by guards at the door. Roman supervision intensifies as Octavian prepares to depart Alexandria. Plans are underway for the transport of Cleopatra to Rome. Officials inspect ceremonial garments, jewelry, and items associated with her status, preparing an inventory of objects to be taken. Cleopatra is expected to appear in the triumph, following earlier precedents in which defeated rulers are displayed in processions through the Roman capital. Ancient narratives describe Cleopatra requesting permission to make offerings at the tomb of Antony. Octavian grants the request under controlled conditions. She visits the burial site accompanied by guards. During this visit, she performs traditional rites and leaves offerings. Afterward, she is returned to the palace chambers. The event marks one of her final public appearances inside Alexandria. Upon returning to her quarters, Cleopatra asks to bathe and change clothing. Roman guards grant access to attendants bringing garments and cleaning water. The queen's chambers contain items of personal significance and ceremonial attire that she has been allowed to retain. Attendants prepare her clothing while Romans remain stationed outside the entrance. A message is then delivered to Octavian requesting permission to meet him one more time. The request concerns her burial wishes and the handling of property associated with her dynasty. Octavian agrees to the meeting. Accounts describe the audience as taking place in a controlled environment within the palace. Cleopatra appears in formal attire suitable for an official exchange. Roman guards and attendants witness the meeting. During the audience, Cleopatra asks for burial beside Antony. She also asks that certain individuals among her attendants be allowed to remain with her. Octavian states that arrangements will be considered but does not provide immediate confirmation. After the audience, Cleopatra is escorted back to her chambers. Guards resume their positions and Roman attendants continue their monitoring duties. Following this meeting, the queen requests a meal. Roman guards allow the attendants to bring food into the chamber. Ancient descriptions state that shortly afterward, a container traditionally described as a basket enters the room. Its contents are not recorded in administrative reports, but later narratives claim it carries items associated with funerary preparation. Cleopatra instructs her attendants not to admit further visitors. Iris and Charmian remain inside the chamber. Roman guards observe but do not interfere, assuming routine activity. The queen changes clothing and prepares herself according to established court practices. Attendants assist in arranging garments and placing jewelry. Roman sources record that guards later notice extended silence inside the chamber. Upon entering, they find Cleopatra lying on a couch, Iris dying at her feet, and Charmian adjusting the queen's attire. All 3 women are unresponsive or close to death. The exact method used is not documented in administrative records. With Cleopatra dead, Roman soldiers secure the chamber. Physicians enter confirm the deaths. Octavian is notified and orders that Cleopatra be buried beside Antony, fulfilling her last request. The burial occurs in Alexandria, carried out with appropriate rites and under Roman supervision. Cleopatra's death ends the political structure of the Ptolemaic monarchy. With no surviving ruler capable of claiming authority, Egypt becomes a territory administered directly by Rome. Octavian finalizes the transition before departing the city. The circumstances of Cleopatra's death are recorded in ancient texts, but the specific method remains uncertain. Roman accounts, written in the decades following the event, describe a snake identified as an asp being brought to her chamber concealed in a container. According to these narratives, the bite of the snake causes her death. The asp, associated in Egypt with royalty and divine protection, appears in Roman descriptions as the instrument of her final act. The accounts of Plutarch, Dio Cassius, and other ancient authors include variations. Some state that the snake is delivered in a basket containing figs. Others report that Cleopatra keeps it inside a vessel. A number of these texts mention small puncture marks found on her body. These details are not drawn from contemporary administrative reports, but from narratives composed later by Roman writers using oral traditions and earlier historical works. No official Roman document from the period provides confirmation of a snake. Roman officers stationed at the palace record that Cleopatra dies inside her chamber, with 2 attendants present. Guards find her lying on a couch, with Iris collapsed nearby and Charmian adjusting the queen's clothing before she falls. The scene is consistent across ancient descriptions, but the cause of death is not recorded in administrative logs. Roman physicians, summoned to examine the bodies, do not leave written findings concerning the method. The identification of the asp in ancient literature reflects the broader cultural context. Snakes hold symbolic significance in Egypt. The Uraeus cobra appears on royal headdresses, representing sovereignty and protection. In temple reliefs and decorative art, serpents carry associations with divine authority. These symbols are widely recognized in the Eastern Mediterranean, including by Roman audiences. Ancient authors writing for Roman readers often reference the asp as an emblem of Egyptian royalty. Another version recorded in ancient texts suggests that Cleopatra applies a poisonous ointment, or uses a sharp instrument coated with toxin. These reports appear in writings that discuss the difficulties of transporting a dangerous snake into a guarded palace chamber. Descriptions of small wounds on Cleopatra's arm or breast appear in some accounts, but they vary in detail. None originate from eyewitness administrative testimony. The attendants Iris and Charmian also die under the same circumstances. Their deaths indicate coordinated action within the chamber. Roman guards stationed outside note no signs of struggle or external intrusion. The doors are sealed and access is controlled. The presence of 3 individuals dying within a short time frame suggests the use of a substance or method administered inside the chamber. But the specific mechanism is not documented. Octavian receives news of Cleopatra's death shortly after guards enter the chamber. His reaction is recorded in ancient narratives, which state that he orders immediate burial. He allows Cleopatra to be interred beside Antony in accordance with her request. Roman troops supervise the preparation and transportation of the body. Burial takes place in Alexandria, inside a royal structure associated with the Ptolemaic dynasty. Roman writers provide explanations for the method of death based on their own cultural context. The snake narrative becomes common in literature because it aligns with Roman interest in Egyptian customs and symbols. The image of Cleopatra dying by the bite of a royal asp appears in poetry, histories, and later dramatic works. These interpretations draw upon established associations rather than documented forensic evidence. Archaeological research has not produced physical remains or direct artifacts linked to Cleopatra's death. The location of her tomb, likely within the palace district or nearby, has not been identified. The destruction and sedimentation affecting coastal Alexandria over many centuries have obscured structures in the area. Marine and terrestrial excavations have not uncovered material evidence confirming or contradicting ancient descriptions of the event. The accounts of Roman authors emphasize the absence of disorder in Alexandria after Cleopatra's death. Roman troops maintain control of the palace and surrounding districts. The transition of authority proceeds without major disturbance. Administrative records continue, and officials prepare for Egypt's incorporation into the Roman system. Cleopatra's death therefore marks the final administrative step in the dissolution of the Ptolemaic monarchy. The uncertainty surrounding the method of death has persisted for centuries because ancient narratives offer multiple explanations without providing official documentation. The asp appears in literary accounts, written several generations after the event. Other narratives mention poison or mechanical instruments. Roman administrative notes confirm only the outcome. Cleopatra dies inside the palace chamber, under guarded conditions. These facts define the historical record. Cleopatra is found deceased on a couch, attended by Iris and Charmian. No Roman document from the period identifies the method. Later, ancient historians preserve various explanations without a single confirmed source. The symbolic association of the asp becomes prominent in cultural memory, but the evidence remains inconclusive. Cleopatra's death concludes her role in Egyptian political life and ends the line of Ptolemaic rulers. Her burial in Alexandria completes the sequence of events that began with the siege of the city and the collapse of Antony's forces. The administrative transformation of Egypt continues immediately afterward under Roman command. When Roman guards enter Cleopatra's chamber and discover her body, they also find the bodies of her two closest attendants, Iris and Charmian. Their presence is consistently recorded across ancient accounts. Both women have served Cleopatra for many years, and both remain with her during the final period of confinement in Alexandria. They are among the few individuals permitted inside her quarters under Roman supervision. In the final hours before their deaths, Iris and Charmian perform routine duties associated with royal service. Ancient descriptions state that they assist Cleopatra in bathing, dressing, and arranging her appearance. They prepare the chamber, manage personal belongings, and control entry as allowed by the guards. Roman officers outside the doorway later report no unusual sounds or visible disturbance. The area remains quiet until the guards finally push open the chamber doors. Inside, the scene is described in detail by ancient authors. Cleopatra lies on a couch. Iris is found collapsed at her feet, already dead or close to death. Charmian is recorded as adjusting the queen's diadem or assisting with the final arrangement of her clothing. When questioned by Roman soldiers, she reportedly confirms that the act has been completed and then loses consciousness. These descriptions are preserved in ancient texts and referenced across several later works. They provide the only detailed record of the attendants' final actions. Roman guards and physicians enter the chamber shortly afterward. The attendants' bodies are examined along with Cleopatra's. Administrative records from the period do not include medical explanations. The Roman physicians present do not leave documented findings regarding cause of death. The absence of official reports leaves no direct evidence about the specific method used. The coordinated timing of the three deaths indicates that all events unfold within a narrow interval. But the process is not recorded in the administrative sources. The roles of Iris and Charmian within Cleopatra's household are reflected in earlier records of the court. They're part of the queen's inner circle and accompany her in formal events, religious ceremonies, and travel within Egypt. Their presence in the mausoleum during Antony's final hours, and later in Cleopatra's restricted chamber, shows their involvement in significant moments of the royal household. Their access to Cleopatra during the final period of confinement indicates that Roman authorities accepted them as essential attendants, whose presence did not threaten security. During the weeks preceding Cleopatra's death, both attendants managed daily care in a confined environment. They organized clothing, prepare food brought under guard, and maintain the internal order of the chamber. Roman supervision does not extend into the room itself. Guards remain positioned at the entrance, while attendants move freely inside. This arrangement allows the queen to maintain some continuity of her household, despite the loss of political authority. The deaths of Iris and Charmian occur under the same restricted conditions as Cleopatra's. The chamber is locked from the inside, and guards stationed outside see no signs of forced entry. The absence of disorder in the room is noted by ancient observers. Items inside remain intact, and there is no evidence of struggle or external interference. The scene described in ancient writings presents an organized environment, in contrast to typical post-conflict disturbances found in other historical contexts. After confirming the deaths, Roman officials order the room secured. They remove movable objects, record items of value, and prepare the bodies for transfer. Octavian is notified before any further steps are taken. He authorizes burial for Cleopatra and instructs that attendants involved in her final hours be treated according to established customs. Iris and Charmian are reported to have been buried following appropriate rites, though the exact location is not preserved in surviving sources. Their role in the final event is documented solely through the accounts of ancient authors. No inscriptions or papyri from Alexandria record personal details about their origins or early lives. Their identities appear in the historical record because of their participation in Cleopatra's final hours. They are present in each version of the narrative, and their actions form part of the documented sequence surrounding the queen's death. The combined deaths of Cleopatra, Iris, and Charmian represent the closing moment of the royal household as a functioning institution. With the queen deceased and her attendants gone, the structure of personal service that defined the Ptolemaic monarchy ceases. Roman officials assume control of the palace chambers. Personal artifacts are inventoried, and remaining attendants outside the queen's quarters are reassigned, dismissed, or transferred into Roman custody. The deaths of Iris and Charmian mark the final withdrawal of Cleopatra's immediate circle. They are the last individuals to serve her in an official capacity before Egypt passes fully into Roman administration. With their passing, the personal dimension of the Ptolemaic court disappears, leaving only the political and administrative framework for Rome to reorganize. News of Cleopatra's death reaches Octavian within the palace complex. Roman officers stationed near her chamber deliver the report, and Octavian orders the area secured. He instructs guards to prevent unauthorized entry and directs physicians to verify the deaths. Following the confirmation, Octavian issues orders concerning the disposition of the bodies, the continuation of public order, and the reassignment of responsibilities within the newly conquered territory. Octavian authorizes Cleopatra's burial beside Mark Antony. Ancient accounts record that he grants this request without delay. Roman troops supervise the preparation of the burial site and accompany the transport of the bodies. Antony and Cleopatra are interred in Alexandria in accordance with established customs. The exact location of the tomb is not preserved in surviving sources. With Cleopatra dead, Octavian turns to administrative matters. He places Egypt under direct Roman control, designating it not as a senatorial province, but as territory governed by a prefect appointed by him personally. This structure differs from other Roman provincial arrangements. It ensures that Egypt's resources, particularly grain, remain under the emperor's direct supervision. Octavian's decision reflects Egypt's significance to Rome's food supply and financial stability. Roman officials begin taking inventory of Alexandria's treasury. They record gold, silver, stored grain, and other assets. Military installations, dockyards, armories, and archives are inspected. Octavian orders the preservation of key administrative buildings. He instructs soldiers to maintain discipline and avoid actions that might provoke unrest. The city's economy, religious institutions, and civic functions continue operating under supervision of Roman-appointed administrators. Cleopatra and Antony's children remain in Alexandria briefly after her death. Octavian orders that Alexander Helios, Cleopatra Selene, and Ptolemy Philadelphus be transported to Rome. Preparations are made for their departure. They are placed under the guardianship of Octavia, the sister of Octavian and the former wife of Antony. This arrangement aligns with established Roman practices for the families of defeated leaders, allowing for controlled integration into Roman elite households. Caesarion, Cleopatra's son with Julius Caesar, is not included in these arrangements. Ancient sources record that he was killed shortly before or shortly after Cleopatra's death, acting on Octavian's instructions. The reasoning for this decision appears consistently in ancient texts. Caesarion's lineage connects him to Julius Caesar, and his existence represents a potential claim to authority that Octavian cannot allow. His death marks the end of direct dynastic connection between Egypt and the Roman ruling family. In Alexandria, Octavian addresses the city's population. Ancient authors describe him delivering a public statement to the Alexandrians, assuring them that their lives and property are secure. He announces that taxes will be regulated under Roman administration and that the city will retain its important commercial role. These assurances aim to stabilize the urban population after months of conflict and uncertainty. The Egyptian priesthood receives specific attention. Temples and religious institutions hold economic assets and land. Octavian confirms that temple property will remain intact. He maintains the privileges of local priestly groups, ensuring cooperation during the transition. This approach follows Roman patterns in other territories, where respect for local religious institutions supports political stability. Octavian also reorganizes the military presence in Egypt. He leaves a garrison in Alexandria under the command of a Roman prefect. Legions are stationed at strategic points along the Nile to secure transportation routes and protect grain shipments. Naval units remain in the harbor to control maritime access and support communication with other Roman provinces. Following the stabilization of Alexandria, Octavian travels through parts of Egypt. Ancient accounts describe his visit to the tomb of Alexander the Great. He views Alexander's body, displayed as part of traditional ceremonial practice. Octavian requests to see the remains directly. When offered the opportunity to view the bodies of the Ptolemies, he declines, saying he wished to see a king, not dead men. This event is recorded in several ancient texts and marks one of the few detailed descriptions of Octavian's movements within the city. After completing these actions, Octavian prepares to depart Egypt. He leaves behind administrators to implement Roman governance. The reorganization includes new systems for grain transport, taxation, and legal authority. Egypt becomes a controlled province with a unique administrative status, reflecting its economic and strategic importance. The transition from Ptolemaic to Roman rule is accomplished without large-scale destruction. Alexandria remains intact, and its institutions continue to function. The end of Cleopatra's reign, therefore, marks not only the conclusion of a dynasty, but the incorporation of Egypt into a new imperial structure. With her death and Antony's defeat, the political landscape of the eastern Mediterranean changes decisively, placing the region firmly under Roman authority. After Cleopatra's death and the establishment of Roman control in Alexandria, the future of her children becomes a central administrative matter. Each child's status is recorded in ancient accounts, and their movements after the fall of Egypt follow established Roman practices for handling the families of defeated rulers. Caesarion, Cleopatra's eldest son and the child she had with Julius Caesar, does not survive the transition. Ancient texts state that Caesarion is killed on Octavian's orders. He is intercepted during an attempted flight toward Upper Egypt or Nubia. His lineage, as the biological son of Julius Caesar, presents a political complication for Octavian, who is consolidating authority in Rome. Caesarion's death removes any potential claim connected to Caesar's name. Ancient authors consistently record this event, identifying it as a deliberate action carried out shortly after Cleopatra's death. Cleopatra's other three children, Alexander Helios, Cleopatra Selene, and Ptolemy Philadelphus, survive. All three are taken into Roman custody. They remain briefly in Alexandria under guard before being transported to Rome. Their journey follows protocols used for the families of other defeated rulers absorbed into Roman power structures. Upon arrival in Rome, the children are placed under the protection of Octavia, sister of Octavian, and former wife of Mark Antony. This arrangement provides the children with a household of high status and political security. Octavia maintains a respected position in Roman society, and her guardianship ensures that Cleopatra's children are cared for within an influential environment. Ancient accounts describe Octavia as providing education and upbringing in accordance with Roman practices. The children participate in the triumphal procession held by Octavian. Ancient authors report that they appear in ceremonial roles, reflecting the recent incorporation of Egypt into Roman rule. They are displayed wearing attire symbolizing Eastern royalty. This public presentation marks their official transition from members of a ruling dynasty to dependents within the Roman state. After the triumph, the children settle into life within Octavia's household. Alexander Helios and Ptolemy Philadelphus appear briefly in ancient records during their early years in Rome. Their later lives are not documented in surviving sources. No inscriptions, administrative documents, or literary references record their adulthood. Their names do not reappear in Roman historical narratives. The absence of further information suggests that they die at a young age or live in private circumstances without public roles. Cleopatra Selene, the daughter of Cleopatra and Antony, remains visible in historical records. She marries Juba II, the Roman-approved king of Mauritania. This marriage forms part of Rome's broader practice of establishing regional client monarchies. Cleopatra Selene becomes queen of Mauritania, ruling alongside Juba II with recognition from Rome. Coins issued during her reign depict her image combined with symbols referencing her Ptolemaic heritage, including motifs connected to Egypt. These coins provide the most substantial surviving evidence of her adult life. Cleopatra Selene's rule in Mauritania reflects the continuation of dynastic elements under Roman oversight. She oversees construction projects, including architectural developments at Caesarea, the capital of Mauritania. Her name appears in inscriptions and on coinage throughout her reign. These records demonstrate her position within the regional monarchy. Established by Rome, she becomes the primary surviving link to the Ptolemaic legacy. The geographical and political distance between Mauritania and Egypt prevents Cleopatra Selene from influencing events in her ancestral homeland. Egypt remains under the authority of Roman prefects appointed directly by Octavian. The administrative system in Egypt develops according to Roman needs, centered on grain production and taxation. Cleopatra Selene's life in Mauritania continues independently of developments in the former Ptolemaic Kingdom. The survival and later status of Cleopatra Selene represent the longest documented continuation of Cleopatra of the 7th lineage. Her children with Juba II, mentioned in limited surviving records, inherit Mauritanian royal status. Their names appear in inscriptions and official documents associated with the region. Through them, elements of the Ptolemaic heritage remain integrated into the political structures of North Africa. The disappearance of Alexander Helios and Ptolemy Philadelphus from the historical record reflects the common pattern of defeated royal families incorporated into Rome. If they live into adulthood, their roles remain private or limited to ceremonial functions. No monuments, literary references, or administrative inscriptions identify them after their early years in Rome. Their absence from later documents indicates that they do not participate in public life. The fate of Cleopatra's children marks the final dispersal of the Ptolemaic dynasty. With Caesarion dead, the lineage connected directly to Julius Caesar ends. Cleopatra Selene's life in Mauritania preserves one strand of Ptolemaic descent, but Egypt no longer possesses a ruling family tied to its ancient monarchy. The political continuity of the Ptolemaic state concludes with Octavian's annexation of Egypt and the relocation of its surviving heirs. The transition from Alexandria to Rome, and in Cleopatra Selene's case, to Mauritania illustrates the broader Roman practice of incorporating conquered royal families into its societal framework. The children become part of the Roman world, their lives shaped by structures of authority that replace the monarchy their parents once represented. With Cleopatra dead, Antony buried, and the Ptolemaic monarchy dissolved, Octavian finalizes the administrative reorganization of Egypt. The transition alters the political structure of the Eastern Mediterranean and establishes a new framework for Roman control over one of the most economically significant regions of the ancient world. Octavian designates Egypt as his personal domain rather than permitting it to become a senatorial province. This status differs from most territories within the Roman system. Instead of being governed by a proconsul appointed by the Senate, Egypt is placed under the authority of a prefect chosen directly by Octavian. The first prefect is Gaius Cornelius Gallus. His role includes military command, supervision of taxation, control of the grain supply, and oversight of local administration. Roman prefects command legions stationed within Egypt. The garrison includes troops positioned in Alexandria and at key points along the Nile. Their presence secures transportation routes, protects grain shipments, and maintains order in regions where local unrest previously challenged Ptolemaic authority. The prefect's command structure ensures direct reporting to Octavian, bypassing the Senate and reinforcing the emperor's personal control. Administrative continuity is maintained by retaining many Egyptian officials. Scribes, temple administrators, and tax collectors continue their duties under Roman supervision. Documents from the early Roman period show that existing systems of land registration, taxation, and irrigation management remain intact. Roman authorities used the well-established structures of the Egyptian bureaucracy to maintain agricultural productivity, which is essential for grain exports. Alexandria continues as a major urban center. The city's port becomes a key link between Egypt and the rest of the Roman world. Grain shipments depart for Rome on a regular schedule, using fleets organized under Roman command. These shipments become vital for feeding the urban population of the capital. Grain from Egypt stabilizes prices and reduces shortages. Roman prefects prioritized the security of the grain route, ensuring that the harvest is transported efficiently to Alexandria and shipped north. Temples across Egypt retain land, laborers, and administrative responsibilities. Roman authorities allow priests to maintain religious rituals and local festivals. This policy supports stability in rural regions. Inscriptions from the early Roman era show continued temple construction, including repairs and additions funded by local communities and temple estates. The preservation of traditional structures helps integrate Egypt into the Roman system without significant cultural disruption. Greek remains the administrative language of government in Alexandria and many other urban centers. Demotic and later Coptic continue in local and religious contexts. This multilingual environment reflects the long-standing structure of Egyptian society. Roman prefects issued decrees in Greek, consistent with established administrative practice. Legal documents produced during this period use familiar formats, indicating continuity rather than abrupt transformation. Economically, Egypt maintains its importance in agriculture, papyrus production, and trade. The Nile Valley continues to produce large quantities of grain, while Alexandria's workshops manufacture goods for export. Roman control stabilizes trade routes in the eastern Mediterranean, enabling merchants to operate with fewer interruptions from conflict. Alexandria remains a hub for commerce, linking Africa, the Near East, and the Mediterranean basin. Octavian introduces measures to secure loyalty among local elites. Land grants, administrative appointments, and recognition of civic privileges reinforced cooperation. The Alexandrian ruling classes, Greeks, Egyptians, and Jews continue to participate in municipal governance, although ultimate authority resides with Roman officials. The city's political institutions, including councils and assemblies, function within the new administrative hierarchy. The library district and the Melchian remain active during the early Roman period. Scholars continue their work, supported by local institutions rather than the royal household. While earlier losses to the library's collections occurred during previous conflicts, intellectual activity in Alexandria persists. Greek literature, mathematics, and science continue to develop in the city under Roman governance. The broader integration of Egypt into the Roman world reshapes economic networks. Goods produced in Egypt, grain, papyrus, textiles, glass, and luxury items, flow into Roman markets. In return, Rome introduces new administrative practices, coinage, and legal structures. Over time, Roman influence spreads through the Nile Valley, although many local traditions endure. The annexation of Egypt marks a turning point in Roman history. Control of Egyptian resources strengthens Octavian's position in Rome. The wealth of the region contributes to public distributions, building projects, and military financing. Octavian's return to Rome after securing Egypt leads to political developments culminating in the establishment of the Principate. Egypt becomes one of the core provinces supporting the new imperial system. For Egypt itself, the end of the Ptolemaic monarchy closes nearly 3 centuries of Hellenistic rule. The combination of Greek and Egyptian institutions that defined the kingdom gives way to a unified administrative structure under Roman authority. Temples continue to function, cities remain active, and rural life follows established patterns, but the political independence of Egypt does not return. The incorporation of Egypt into the Roman Empire reshapes the Mediterranean world for centuries. The region remains under Roman control until the rise of Byzantine authority, and its agricultural output continues to play a central role in the survival and growth of the empire. The fall of Cleopatra and the end of the Ptolemaic Kingdom mark a decisive transformation in the history of the Mediterranean world. Egypt, which for centuries maintained a distinctive political and cultural identity, becomes a central province of the emerging Roman Empire. The transition occurs not through widespread destruction, but through administrative reorganization carried out under Octavian's direct authority. With the establishment of Roman prefects, the region enters a new phase defined by imperial oversight, stable grain production, and integration into a wider economic system. Cleopatra's death concludes the final chapter of a dynasty that began with the division of Alexander the Great as empire. Her reign reflects the complexity of a kingdom positioned between traditional Egyptian institutions and the political demands of the Hellenistic world. The alliances she forms with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony demonstrate the degree to which Egypt's survival depended on external power during the final century of Ptolemaic rule. When those alliances collapse, the kingdom cannot withstand the expansion of Rome. The incorporation of Egypt strengthens Octavian Italy and contributes to the establishment of the Principate. Control of Egyptian grain helps stabilize the Roman capital, while access to the region's wealth enhances the resources available to the new imperial administration. From this point forward, Egypt remains one of the most valuable provinces in the empire, influencing Roman prosperity for generations. In Alexandria, intellectual, economic, and religious life continues. The city remains a major center of scholarship and commerce, yet its political role changes permanently. No native or Hellenistic ruler again governs Egypt independently. The death of Cleopatra and the annexation of her kingdom therefore represent more than the end of a dynasty. They mark the moment when power in the Mediterranean becomes unified under Rome, setting the foundation for an imperial order that will shape the ancient world for centuries.